So let's talk about the Joust, a wargaming tactic that finds its place. I won't say it's an interesting strategy. Let's just put it that way. A reckless strategy, but one that, understanding how the mechanics work of your particular war game, could have the potential for payoff. So we want to push it out there, put it in your toolkit, your wargaming toolkit. That said, it is very bold. It is very daring. It is very aggressive. So the Joust happens in a war game where you have a unit that has to keep moving every turn. An example would be airplane or most space combat games like X-Wing miniatures, although there are a few ships that can stand still. But some sort of game where the momentum is pushing you forward. You could go really fast, you could go really slow, but every turn, whatever that movement, whatever that unit of movement is, it's moving you along. Wings of Glory World War I is one of the examples that we're going to look at utilizing the Joust, this concept of the Joust. And on a side note, it is one of my favorite miniature games. It's a lot of fun to play. It scales really well. Really, really fast and flexible rule set. We'll push that aside, and I've pushed up some Wings of Glory Tactica to my YouTube channel here. But in Wings of Glory, your plane moves every turn. Maybe fast, maybe a slow, but it needs to stay in the air, so it needs to have that compression, pushing it or pulling it. Sometimes there's a puller too, a pusher or puller, depending on the plane. We're talking World War I. So a Joust is where I'm literally going to go straight at you. I'm going straight at you. You're coming straight at me. Guns blazing. We're going to go head to head, shoot at each other with machine guns, autocannons, lasers, missiles, whatever it's going to be, and then pass by each other. So the idea is, yeah, I'm going to take some damage, but I'm going to eat that damage, and I am going to deal a lot more damage to you, or I'm going to try and cripple you with my damage. The advantage of the Joust when you're coming straight on is that you know you're going to hit. You know that you're going to have them in your sights, and you got to roll the dice or flip the cards to see if you actually hit. But in terms of firing arc and range, you know you at least have that. You're willing to trade the potential for damage back. So right away we can see like, hey, this is a very bold and an aggressive move because tactically speaking, if we're looking at World War I or plane combat, I don't really want to go head to head. I mean, I want to kind of loop and move and try to get behind you. If I can get behind you and stay on your tail and just start shooting, again, World War I, unless you have a tail gunner, I'm going to be able to shoot you and you can't shoot me. That's the optimal, and you want to utilize a wingman and try to do that tactically. But we have the Joust. The Joust is the guaranteed, I hit you, you hit me, I'll eat the damage, hopefully I cripple you. So the first question is kind of deciding what are you going to joust at? Kind of knowing the stats of the units, meaning if I'm flying a plane with 15 hull points, and you're flying a plane with 10 or 8 hull points, a lighter plane, even if you're faster, more nimble, that's not a bad trade for the Joust, because if you inflict 3 or 4 hull points on me, I'm still over 10. If I inflict 3 or 4 hull points on you, I'm already bringing you down further. So the first thing we look at if you're going to Joust, and same thing with X-Wing miniatures, if we're looking at shield and hull, what are the stats on there? If you have the piece you're jousting against, if they have higher stats, then I really don't want to joust. This is, of course, modified by weapons. If my weapons are more powerful, maybe they throw out more dice to attack. Maybe I use a different damage deck in the case of Wings of Glory, although for planes, with the exception of bombers and some of the heavier planes, they all kind of use the machine gun deck. But maybe I have the ability to deal more damage based on that. Then I want to joust. The final mechanic is receiving damage. Now, in Wings of Glory, damage is dealt through a deck of cards. You pull the deck of cards. You don't show it to your opponent. You don't show it to the other team. There's numerical values on there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 0. 0 meaning you haven't taken any damage. And there's also special effects like engine damage, the pilot got hit, you're on fire, the rudder's damaged. What's unique is this represents in the game. So I draw damage cards. I subtract my hull points, my damage. I apply or announce any conditions like my plane's on fire or the engine's sputtering, but you don't really know how much damage you've done until my plane falls out of the sky or something catastrophic happens. That's kind of neat. It's kind of neat on a side note because it represents the fact, just because I'm putting machine gun bullets through your airframe, am I hitting vital components? What's going on? Just how much damage did I deal? Comparing that to X-Wing miniatures where all damage is known. Okay, well in X-Wing we got sensors and scanners and droids and things like that, so it makes sense. At the start of the game, both teams use the same damage deck in Wings of Glory. And as you draw cards, you begin to get an idea of the damage that's been dealt out. So if I see on the other team that everyone's got 4 or 5 damage cards and it's spread out evenly, there's probably a lot of zeros. Counting cards, literally counting cards. There's probably a lot of zeros spread out on there. That means now that the deck is smaller, the chance of having a 3, 4, or 5 damage is much greater. Maybe I don't want to joust. There's also a card in the deck, an explosion card. Literally has an explosion on it. There's only one in the deck for Wings of Glory. And when you pull this card, what that represents is a fuel hit or an engine hit, and your plane literally explodes. Doesn't matter how much hull it has. It's just catastrophic. You just explode, which of course is representative of the time period, but it is pretty rare. At the start of the game, you mix that deck up. That explosion symbol is in that deck somewhere. What is it, Schroeder's cat? I mean, it could be the first card, it could be the last card, but playing the odds, it's probably not the first card or the last card. So with that in mind, if I'm going to joust and draw cards, I don't want to get that explosion. I want to do it at the beginning of the game. If we're towards the end of the game and every plane has damage and the deck is down to 1/3 and no one's drawn that explosion yet, that's when I want to be a little more conservative. So depending on the mechanics, another example would be, let's say we're playing a game where you have powers that allow you to regenerate shields or manipulate dice or spend this pilot point to move out of the way and negate an attack. At the beginning, when I joust, if I'm jousting and you have all those abilities, the joust is going to be less effective because you have the option to use those abilities. You might just say, the heck with it, I'm going to eat the damage, or you might not. So jousting at the beginning of the game, maybe not. Controlling the damage, influencing the damage. If we're at the later stage in the game, and there's a rule system where you've utilized your powers, you've utilized your in-ship abilities, you're down to just what you have left, maybe I want to joust then. Certainly not the best tactic, but one that I frequently employ because we're going head-to-head and we're going to do this, right? I want something to happen. I do take unnecessary risks. I guess you never want to fly with Fritz. You never want to be my wingman because I am out for glory. I am out for tabletop glory, bold, aggressive, decisive. But that said, I'm aware of the risks that I'm taking. So I'm not surprised when I get into trouble, or I'm not surprised when it's like, that gamble didn't pay off. It's the chaotic neutral in me. I'll gamble on anything. The bigger the reward, the bigger the risk, I'm in. So I say that in pushing this out here, being honest that I do usually joust in games where I can, but it's not always the most tactical. And most of the time, I'm playing those odds. The only time, in full disclosure, that I'm not going to name any names, not naming any names, there are certain Battle Brothers that I love playing war games with, but if I lose or if something happens, I got to hear about it all week. I get random texts. I get random pictures. I mean, it's all in good fun nature. Honestly, I do the same thing. We've been playing a long time. So sometimes when we sit down and we find ourselves on the opposite side of the table, I need that chance for big glory. If I can joust with you turn one and blow you up turn one just on the luck of the dice, I have to take it. Because if that happens, I have bragging rights all week. I can say what an amazing pilot and tabletop general I am, which it's not. I just got completely lucky. And just the price of admission to possibly make that happen is completely worth it. That, of course, is the absolute worst time to do a joust. But now you have an option. You have something for your toolkit and something to consider if you find yourself in a war game where movement has to happen every single turn.